Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Stellium Astrology podcast. This is an enhanced podcast edition, so you can watch it on YouTube or you can listen on the podcasting platform that you choose. And today I'm speaking to a special guest of mine, Kira Sutherland, who is a medical astrologer. She's a nutritionist and naturopath, homeopath, herbalist, and astrologer. And she combines astrology with her knowledge of health and fitness and nutrition in order to empower her clients to make the best health choices for themselves and also to work through some of their health issues or complications. I had a really fun time talking with Kira. We talked about a number of different things. We sort of branched through various areas, but I thought it would be fun for us when we did our part 2, which is available to patrons, to kind of focus a bit more on the elements and to discuss with a particular focus on how health issues can present with certain elemental presences, whether you are overrepresented with an element in some area of your chart or if you're underrepresented. And we did actually talk a little bit about the modes in that area as well. But in general, overarching awesome chat with Kira. She's really fun. She's really inspirational. She's extremely vibrant, and she makes learning feel very easy. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed today's show as much as I enjoyed the first time I ever saw Kira lecture, because she's infectious and you come away feeling really inspired. She's got a lot of fire in her chart, so she's a very inspirational teacher. So yeah, let me know what you think of the episode. Always give me some feedback. Let me know if this has given you a greater insight into some of your own health issues. And I've included in a little description of Kira and what she does, her bio below, so that you can get in touch with her and discuss with her some areas that perhaps, maybe you'd like to explore further, check out some of her courses, or maybe even book a reading with her. Thanks very much, everybody. And if you would like to check out the Patreon content that I'm building up so that you've got a back catalogue of some of the second part interviews that I've done, just head over to my Patreon page, which I'll put a link for below as well. Take care, everyone. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, Kira. How are you?
I'm really good.
And where
Sunday
are
night
you?
For me.
Oh, Sunday night, is it? Oh,
Sunday night for me.
It's Sunday morning for me. So thank you so much for making the effort to meet up. I know it's a busy time for you. Whereabouts are you in the world at the moment?
So right now I'm in Sydney, Australia.
And you've moved from lots of different places, haven't you? You seem to move about a fair bit.
Oh yeah, well it can and I move again in 4 weeks. But yeah. So well, it confuses everybody. I'm American born, but I've spent almost all my adult life living in Australia. After 5 years in Europe, but that's another story of its own. And but we go to Canada a lot because we're a big sporty family that loves to go up in the mountains, and we went and lived in Canada for 3 years. So a lot of people actually got to know me while I was living in Canada in the astrology scene. Somehow that was really, everyone kind of, and then my accent goes there. But we moved back to Australia a few years ago, and yeah, but I do travel a lot, so it confused. Everyone's always like, I don't understand where you are, or where you live.
That's literally like, sometimes I think, I wonder where she's posting this from, because there's sometimes when you're like in like these areas where there's like really heavy snow, so I'm like, she must be in Canada or something. And then it switches and I'm like, she's gone somewhere else.
I'm at the beaches in Sydney, or my family has this tiny little cabin in the snowfields in Canada, so it's like where all the family comes to meet, and it's just this winter wonderland. So we escape the Australian heat. If you've never been in Australia, for people listening, it is astronomically hot during our summer, and so we are snow bunnies and we escape it for
lovely.
Our summer holidays are over Christmas because we're opposite seasons, and so we grab our one child and head over for 7 weeks of it's a bit easier when you only have one kid to travel. So
yeah, I bet. And cheaper as well.
Yes, I always travel. Yes, a lot cheaper. Think about that with how many babies you have.
I'll factor traveling in when we actually are able to start properly traveling again. Just for the listeners, would you be able to tell them a little bit about what it is you do, how you use your astrology?
Sure. So I am a practicing Australian. I'm going to qualify that. I'm not an American naturopath. I'm actually trained in Australia. So I'm an Australian naturopath, nutritionist, herbalist, homeopath. So I have all these set of qualifications. I'm actually also a sports nutritionist, just in case you randomly see other info of me out there. And then while I was studying naturopathy, I formally studied astrology. So my very early 20s, and fell in love with astrology and specifically medical astrology. So there's a whole side to astrology that looks at the human body and your natal chart, as well as the foods we eat and the herbs that we may or may not take, and basically everything has an astrological rulership. So I play around and integrate all of those things into a really fun mix of clinical practice.
So I recorded a bunch of episodes. I've done sort of like a beginner's series, and some of the episodes that I've done are on the sun signs and the planets, and I've talked about this planet or this sun sign rules this area of the body. So for anybody who was listening to those episodes, they might have thought, but what relevance does that have? Why is it important that rules that part of the body? But somebody with sun in Pisces in the 6th house. I knew a guy actually who had sun in Pisces in the 6th house, and when he was born with his feet backwards, and they had to operate and put them forward. And his nickname was Backwards Feet Pete. It's a rare thing.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Wow.
And he had like the most bungled up feet you'd ever seen, but he was so proud of them, and it made it like his thing.
And he was a Pisces. That's so amazing.
Yeah.
Pisces rules feet. Yeah. So what relevance does it have? Oh my gosh, it has huge relevance. It's, it starts with Aries at the head and moves its way down to Pisces with the feet. And we just, depending on our sun sign, our rising sign, our moon, and other planetary placements, it just has so much influence on how we experience our constitutional health and wellness, or our weaknesses. It shows us the areas of our body we're more likely to have issues, just our kind of little Achilles heels that we need to look out for. I mean, like, I'm a Pisces rising, and I am American, so I sound a little bit nasally when I talk, but I'm a little more nasally today than normal because I'm at the end of a head cold, and that's my thing. I catch colds and flus really easily as a Pisces rising. So it's knowing your weaknesses, which they're not a bad thing. They teach you how to better take care of yourself. And that's really how I like to use medical astrology. It's not all doom and gloom and, oh my gosh, you're going to have these issues. It's how can I support, what are my weaknesses?
So what was it that actually drew you to getting into the health field initially? And then what piqued your interest in astrology?
Yeah, that's a good question. Why health originally? I could explain it astrologically with my chart, but I grew up in San Francisco in the 70s, and there was a lot of alternative, San Francisco in the 70s. So there was a lot of alternative medicine. There were a lot of alternative healers. I'm actually born of 2 scientists, but they were, especially my mom, was quite open to alternative therapies. So I kind of grew up with that being part of my landscape. My mom had a really good friend who was a massage therapist, astrologer, and then another friend who was into natural healing and spirituality. And so I think that was always part of that landscape. And then I hopefully none of my family listens to this, but I come from a part of my family is really healthy, and then another part of my family doesn't have the world's greatest health. And I got really curious around nutrition from a young age because I didn't want to go down that same track of some of those health issues. So at about age 9 or 10, I actually started reading nutrition books, not so much diet books, but like, how do I stay healthy? How do I stay fit?
That's very young as well, actually, to be interested.
It was young. It definitely, I think that was the beginning of it. And then I went off to uni and studied sociology and nutrition. So I don't know, I was just always a drive there to understand how to be healthier. And I was always very involved in sport. I was that kid that played every sport possible. So all of that health stuff just, yeah, kind of came into play that way.
For the
I'm a
listeners,
sciencey person.
you've I hope you don't mind me mentioning, but you've got quite a crazy stellium in your chart, don't you?
Yes, I do have a crazy stellium. I have I'm a Pisces. Well, I use Placidus. Let's just get that over with now. It's
okay.
Like admitting what you're, I don't know, it's the big thing. I do use other house systems as well, but if we're talking Placidus, I'm a Pisces rising, but I have a stellium in Aries sitting in my first house. So it's like a double Aries stellium. And I've got North Node, Chiron, Mercury, Sun, Venus, and Saturn all in Aries in the first.
That's an awful lot, a big cluster, isn't it? So, but yeah, that would, that Aries stuff going on in your chart in the first, that's going to give you that sporty edge anyway, isn't it? It's going to make you interested in that kind of area, very driven and motivated.
It is. And because it's the first house, it's about your physical body. In medical astrology, that first house is so much what you experience through your own physicality and your own ups and downs. And so very much. And then I, just to add to that fire, I actually have Moon and Mars conjunct in Sagittarius in the 9th, which probably makes me even more sporty.
Yes.
And as a beautiful other astrologer pointed out, I've Moon, Mars, and Sag conjunct. That's like, and I'm a sports nutritionist. People that don't know me as an astrologer know that that's what I do. So I'm actually an author in, a textbook, a university textbook on not on medical astrology, on sports nutrition.
Wow. So I like that. I love that balance, because I think a lot of people, especially when they're early in their journey in astrology, are looking for validation of some description. And I think that, being able to be seen as a credible source of knowledge in an academic and accepted area of study is really nice. It's really validating. And actually, for anybody who's learning, they can say, well, check out Kira. She's actually a published nutritionist, but also practices astrology right beside it. So you don't with all your clients, do you? It's just some of them.
Yeah, no. So I actually have 2 totally separate websites. So I'm not hiding anything, but I don't need to throw everything in people's face. So whatever they want, they can find about me. I mean, if you Googled me, you could find it all. But people book it and see me naturopathically sports nutrition. And that's I mentor other students, and I do that as 50% of my career. I lecture at the undergraduate level at a university, specifically in naturopathy and sports nutrition. And then I have my whole medical astrology side. So people either book in for one or the other. Although, to be honest, I will always ask someone their birth date and year, because you have to legally. So even my clients that don't know I do astrology, deep down in my head, I'm still using the filter of the body astrologically, at least knowing their sun sign, because I kind of can't separate that out in my brain and how I process things through it. And it just gives me that little extra hint, or that little that insight into what's maybe why, the driving force of what's going on for that person.
Yeah.
It's kind of cheating.
It's no, I
in a good way.
It helps me to empathize. I've noticed that if I'm struggling with somebody, if I've got a lot of air in my chart. I think empathy, I'm very empathic because I do have a Scorpio moon, but I think that empathy is not always my immediate go-to. And I'm overly logic and analytical. But as soon as I look at the chart, which is my analytical tool, it helps me to empathize. And I can say, absolutely, oh, they're having an awful time at the moment.
Absolutely.
Or that's why they're doing that.
It's so funny, because astrology, I think one of the best gifts astrology ever gave me and gives to other people is it makes you find the love or the empathy, or whatever you want to say, for every person and who they are and how they operate. Because, we get those people that in life that challenge us or irritate us, or you get clients that are like, I have clients that confront me, right? They're like, I find their energy confronting, their personality confronting. And if you can look to that chart, if you can access that, you can see the filters that they live their life through. And you can go, oh, I get it's just this miscommunication of our elements with each other, or you can pull yourself into their, Scorpio moon, Leo moon, Taurus rising, whatever it is, and you can kind of get where you can see the world through their eyes, which for a really fire dominant person is, takes me a lot to slow down and do that. But it's good. It's my Pisces gets there.
Yeah. You do
So
have that added Pisces edge, don't you? So it gives you that little extra level. Well, so astrology gives us a great tool to understanding other people, which I think is one of the best things about astrology, because once you've learned about yourself, then being able to understand other people, and especially if you're somebody in consultation who actually can help other people understand themselves, is so good, so interesting. So what was it that actually led you towards astrology? Where was that doorway where you were studying nutrition and then you suddenly went, oh, hang on a sec?
Well, I was always into astrology. Like, growing up, astrology was always talked about. One of my mom's best friends, gorgeous woman, was another Aries, and so she used to have these little Aries chats with me, and I remember her giving me my first book just on Aries, which is perfect for an Aries. I still have it somewhere. It's this massive book. And so when I got to my early 20s and I was formally studying naturopathy, the school I was studying at also offered astrology. And it wasn't like, oh my God, I've just found astrology. It was like, oh, I've finally settled down enough that I can start studying astrology formally as well. Because I had played with it a lot over the last 5 years. I had also had a boyfriend whose mother was an astrologer. So I was always given lots on astrology. But yeah, I formally started studying around 21, 22. And so that's 30 years ago now. Oh my God. But for me, it was this beautiful combination. I mean, learning the astrology is always just so exciting. And if you remember back when you were learning, it just blows your mind when you then get to learn. And every week is like, oh, hey, I can't believe this. But for me, the medical astrology was just, oh my gosh. In naturopathy, which is Western alternative medicine, it's been around for thousands of years, yet we don't really have a system that we put things through. Everyone was graduating and they were like, oh, I'm going to go study traditional Chinese medicine, I'm going to go study Ayurveda. And I was like, those are amazing because they have these systems and they have the elements and the doshas. And I was like, but where's our system in the West? Like, we've been around as long. And so learning medical astrology, I was like, oh, here's our system. This used to go hand in hand with regular medicine.
Yeah.
We just threw the baby out with the bathwater in the 1700s when we got rid of, bloodletting and leeches and stuff like that. And for me, it was just that last piece. It was the corner pieces on my puzzle, really. So that's where, So and then I just have years where I focus more on the medical astrology or not. I would definitely say some years it's been a bigger part of my journey, but the last decade, I've probably been, I've been lecturing in medical astrology for about 20 years, but the last decade, it's really gotten busy. It's 50% of what I do now.
Within the last decade, was the time I first ever saw you teach, and I did a weekend class at the London School of Astrology, which was
Frank the Amazing. I'm just reaching up to get something. I'm not leaving, I promise. Yep.
Abandonment issues have been totally.
Okay. I was just standing up for a second.
That's fine. But no, wonderful Frank, absolutely wonderful Frank. He's a huge inspiration to me, and a massive, huge mentor to me as well. So he gets many shout outs on this podcast.
Oh my gosh, Frank is, I think, one of the best. I mean, there's some phenomenal astrologers in the world. There's amazing, but for me, Frank is the jam. He's just such an amazing, I mean, he was your teacher, I know that, but he's such an amazing teacher and a gifter of information. And I remember I had, looked at some of his books, but I remember hearing him speak for the first time. He was in Melbourne, at a
He gets
conference.
about.
Yeah, he does get about. He gets about as much as me, if not more. He was at a conference in Melbourne that we were both speaking at. And so as a speaker, you don't always get to go to all, you go to conferences, but you sometimes are resting. And I went to his, and you don't go to everything, but I remember going to one of his lectures, and I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
it's just the way he lectures speaks to my soul. And yeah, there's a certain people that you listen to that you're like, I could listen to them talk about anything, and I absorb it on a cellular level in a different way. And he's one of those teachers. He's like that for me too.
Yeah. He's I think a lot of his students would agree with you as well.
Yeah.
And just for anybody listening, they can do classes with the London School of Astrology. He's taken it to an online platform now. He did it before all of this crazy coronavirus happened. I think maybe his astrologer's knowledge kind of gave him a little nod in that direction. But yeah, so it's all set up. So basically, if you want to sign up and learn with the LSA, you can do. Basically, that was where I first went to one of your classes. And I just absolutely loved it, because I knew that there was something to medical astrology, but it's just the many branches and avenues you can go down with astrology, like the different ways you can use it. But medical's got to be one of the most healing ways you can work with it, surely.
Oh yeah. Well, for me, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's the people that do psychological astrology, which I just, that blows me away, what people can do with people's charts and their conversations, and, just that whole dynamic of sitting with someone in their chart and teaching them about themselves, and the psychology of that is so beautiful. But yeah, medical astrology just gives you such a different avenue or window of how to look at your own health, and those, as I've said, those predispositions, or why certain ailments are, you can look at the triggers for why you're experiencing certain things. I'll put this caveat in. I'm not a predictive astrologer. There's a lot of astrology where we look at our transits and our progressions and our solar arc. And sure, I look at those for triggers for when things could happen, or also when things could get better. You have transits, just like we have transits that are phenomenal and transits that are a struggle. It happens the same in medical, but it's not, you have to be very cautious with medical, because people can really bring in a lot of fear around a reading or transits, or, oh my God, is this transit mean I'm going to get cancer? Well, there's no transit that means you're going to get cancer. There's no, but and it's interesting, only in the last 2 or 3 years, I get a lot more emails about people wanting to book in about predictive medical astrology. And I actually won't practice that, because I think it's too dangerous. And you can't know what's, every transit, it's, you can't know what it's going to be. So it's interesting that people have a lot more fear in the last couple years around that. I find that really interesting. But with medical, it's more, where I really like it is teaching you how to take care of yourself. I mean, I weave a lot of naturopathy in a consultation. So it's not about just teaching you about yourself. I make people do work, right? You get your little list of what you need to go do, or take, or, try to implement into life. But I find its beauty is in looking at, people telling me what they have now, and we can look at where those triggers are in the chart, and then how to work on them physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So you have all those layers to work on something, because sometimes you have physical ailments that you can't fix. But if we can see the trigger of that physical ailment in the chart, we can then, as astrologers, go, what's the spiritual level to that situation? What's the emotional or the mental situation? And often in natural medicine, we talk about, if you work on one area, mind, body, or spirit, to heal that, often the other two will come along for the party. And you can facilitate healing on a lot of different levels. And I love that it gives you that, layering of healing.
It's incredible.
It's hard to heal.
Yeah, well,
did that make sense, what I just said?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
it absolutely did. And I also went for a reading with you after I had been to your weekend course studying medical astrology. the things that kind of blew my mind were you were mentioning stuff that I knew that family members that I had that had some of these ailments. Like you wrote lists of stuff on the places where I had lots of planets, and you said this can manifest, but you said don't worry about everything I've written, because it doesn't mean you're going to get all of them. It just means that there's a likelihood that, you know, you could experience some of these health issues in your lifetime. And actually, you know, it's made me a lot more mindful, actually. And I'm and I think, you know, especially you know, things like the Jupiter Venus contact are kind of like a diabetic thing, and I have got that sextile, and my partner has got the opposition. And so I'm very aware that, you know, the sweet tooth that I have, and sadly my father does have type 2 diabetes, which he's finally learning to sort out for himself, because he's one of those. It's tough, especially if it's the type 2 where you've been eating a certain way your whole life, and then you have to really rewire your brain into eating better and understanding why. So
healthy's actually not very fun. Let's be honest. No. Eating treats is divine. You know, our taste buds are driven for sugar and fats and those things that were harder to access years ago. And that's good old Venus and Jupiter. You know, running a bit of havoc in a chart.
Exactly.
And we, you know, a lot of people have that.
My sister's, I bought my sister a book a long time ago, because I've always been the naughty one that was experimental with all sorts of different ways to enjoy life that maybe are a little bit naughty, like, you know, have the odd joint or whatever, going out and partying hard. My sister was always really well behaved, but her thing was food. And I bought her a while back, a long time ago now, Food, the Good Girl's Drug. And it's just such an interesting way to reframe that, because we don't realize, I think a lot of people they don't eat mindfully, and they don't realize that anything that we put into our body, anything that we consume, actually can affect our brain chemistry.
Oh yeah. And that's so, you know, if we take it to medical astrology, it's so fascinating, because the 6th house and Virgo rule the small intestines, which is, you know, we got the stomach, which is Cancer, which is like the blender where we blend up food, but then it travels down to your small intestines, where your body actually selectively chooses to absorb things or not through the gut lining. And then what it absorbs, it uses, you know, and becomes us, right? It's where we actually discern. It's such a 6th house thing, the small intestines. It's where we discern what becomes us and what, you know, goes on to Scorpio and poop and out the body. But we now know that 70% we now know our immune system resides in our digestive system, but we now also know that it's our digestive system that makes a lot of our chemicals, or what are known as neurotransmitters, which are involved with how we feel, like our serotonin and our dopamine. A lot of times we didn't realize how much, before we didn't realize how much was actually made in the digestive system. And so the influence of how well the digestive system is going, and the foods we eat, you know, we drive for carbohydrates and sugars because we know they drive dopamine and they drive serotonin, which are some of our feel-good pleasure neurotransmitters. So it's little wonder we have these issues around food and emotions, and it's so intertwined between that 4th house and the 6th house as well, right? Moon, 4th house, Cancer, food and emotions. It's ruled by the same sign. It's like crazy.
It's interesting, isn't it? And this whole aspect of emotional eating, and you know, like I've always kind of envied that Virgo ability to be so in
Virgo
tune.
Aquarian.
Yes. Yeah.
The Virgo Aquarian that like doesn't care about food. No, go on.
Oh, wouldn't that be a dream? Do you know what? When I really am in my Aquarian mindset and just getting on with things, I forget to eat, and then that's when I binge. I suddenly go, I haven't eaten, and then I grab anything I can, because my air just doesn't connect to my body. I think Earth is largely underrepresented in my chart. I think I've only got my Sun and Chiron in Earth signs. So when I get on with what I'm doing, I suddenly go, I don't get hungry, I get hangry. I literally don't get hungry. And some people go, God, I wish I didn't get hungry. And I'm like, no, it's not good, because then you're shaking, you need to eat, and then you just grab whatever you can. So it's a bit of a weird one. But
it's common with strong air. It's common to be caught up in what you're doing and completely forget to take care of the physical body. So one of the big things with air is that grounding and remembering, or like I get a lot of people with strong air to actually set timers while they're working to remind them to stop and drink fluid or go to the bathroom or, you know, whatever, eat, you know, because they completely forget.
Yeah. I literally had a day the other day where I sat in this chair for so long working that when I tried to stand up, my spine, obviously I've got sciatica, a bit of sciatica at the moment, and my back was so bad I stood up and I just couldn't move. I had to call my boyfriend and say, please help me. It was like a human Zimmer frame, because I was just like, I've been sitting here for so long. I didn't even realize.
Easy with air. It's super easy with all that air. So food and sixth house and it's just so intertwined. And we now know there's this huge connection between what we call the gut brain axis, whereas the brain down to the digestive system has this, you know, super highway we call the vagus nerve. And depending on our stress levels, depending on what we're eating, there's this, you know, huge communication going on. And it's so interesting to learn all of this now about the body, but it justifies everything in medical astrology, because the sixth house and Virgo are all about the digestive system, the small intestines, but they're also about the nervous system because of that Virgo Mercury rulership. And so it's that fight, flight, digest, relax rulership. And it's phenomenal how science is proving what medical astrology figured out 2000 years ago.
I really like that you brought that up, because I think for a lot of people, when they think about the sixth house and Virgo, it seems a bit like, oh, it's kind of like routine and kind of health. And it's like, well, how does that fit together? Like, you can almost say, yes, well, you need a good routine. And, you know, like having myself personally, when this whole pandemic kicked in, I went into full on sixth house mode. And I was like, every day I was making a flask, I was preparing my food, and I was making sure I had everything. And I was like and I went into like super control freak mode. But
does that make you feel safer?
Yes. Yeah. Because when I was going out to the office, I wanted to make sure that I had I didn't have to go in the kitchen, or I didn't have to touch anything that anyone else had touched. I mean, it's OCD, and unfortunately the problem with what's happened is it's promoted really normally unhealthy behaviors in people, which it brought out the worst in me in that respect. But I felt better about it, and I realized how routine oriented I am when it comes to my sixth house, because I've got in Placidus, I've got a very big stellium of planets in my sixth house. But I generally go with equal, just because I was raised on equal.
Yes, and I do love equal. I can't. And is that stellium still there in equal house?
It sort of spans over the fifth and the sixth. But I still have Jupiter, Uranus in the sixth, and then in the fifth I have Pluto, Saturn, and my moon. So it's sort of and they're not super crunched up together, but you know, having all of that stuff, I kind of think of the sixth house as like, especially if you're thinking about Placidus, I think of it as like the daily spend, where if you've got a lot of planets there, you kind of just have to do them on a daily basis.
You have to do them, absolutely. And that's you know, when I teach, that's what I say to people, you know, because people freak out. They're like, oh my God, I have all this in the sixth house. And it's like, you just have to use those planets on a daily basis so that they don't use you. You know, in medical astrology, if we go back to traditional medical astrology, you know, planets in the sixth house are going to bring health issues. It doesn't always have to be big, bad stuff. It's just that was the house of, we talk about it now as the house of health, but a traditional astrologer would actually go, oh, it's the house of disease and illness. But I see it much more as the house of disease or illness and health, because it's your daily routine. And 80% of your health is based off of what you do on a daily basis. Do you exercise or not? What do you choose to put in your body is going to go, you know, I'm always amazed. This is the naturopath in me. People don't eat well, and then they don't understand why their body's not functioning. It's like, that is literally the fuel that you have to make the cells of your body. So, you know, it's like driving a car and never putting in the oil and never putting in good petrol, right? It's going to run like shit. So, but it's that routine, and health is a ritual that we have to do, but people don't like to do it because it is
No.
boring. That's what
Yeah.
routine is. So, sixth house planets, you want to keep them happy. You want to keep them in conversation and keep them busy so that they don't arc up on you. The way I teach about medical astrology in some ways is, if you ignore parts of your chart, they start acting like that naughty kid in the back of the class that feels ignored. They're going to arc up and they're going to cause a problem so that you go and pay attention to them. So it's very much about playing with each of your planets and making sure that they feel embodied in some way, be it physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, because they're going to arc up. And a planet in the sixth house, you have to use on a daily basis. Right?
So what you're saying makes me think about the quincunx aspect, or the inconjunct, they call it, don't they? And I did explain during that little the episode that I've done for my listeners, that the quincunx is kind of like an on-off, and it's positioned from the ascendant. So the sixth house and the ascendant are basically that kind of aspect, which makes it difficult to be consciously aware of it.
Yes. Well, and you have that, the quincunx goes from the ascendant either to the sixth house or to the eighth house. And those are both houses that are considered not good health houses. The eighth house is it's actually the house of death. But, we could say transformation, death and rebirth. It's also the house of inherited issues and like genetics. And it's interesting because they both have that aspect where it's very hard for those houses to communicate with each other. It's a different, that from that ascendant to that, and the first house to the sixth and the 12th, it's usually a different mode and a different element. So they just don't speak the same language, right? It's like the way I describe it to clients that don't understand astrology is, I'm like, it's like you have a tricycle with 3 totally different shaped wheels.
That's a great way to describe it. So you're like
riding this tricycle, and it's like there's a square wheel, a round wheel, and a triangle, and it's not a smooth ride. But if you were to keep riding, eventually, hopefully, the wheels become more similar shaped in some way. And but they're really hard communication, and who you want to be and do in that ascendant first house is very different to what that sixth house is asking of you. Very different.
So it's like a kind of taking the time to be consciously aware of your sixth house, even if you don't have planets in there, because whatever rules your sixth house is going to speak with those parts of your life, and the eighth house, I suppose, as well. So bringing that to your consciousness.
Absolutely. And whatever sign is on that cusp, obviously if there's planets in there, you got to take them out for a play, but looking at the ruling planet of that sixth house, if you got Gemini on the sixth house cusp, it's Mercury, right? That's in charge of your sixth house. And so you got to look at where that is and how happy that is, and or how well placed it is or not. And again, eighth house, I see health stuff in the eighth house as well. You often see it.
I've got an eighth house son, so
eighth house is, it's bowels and it's detoxification and it's hormones and, the eighth house gets deep and dirty, and it's amazing and it's powerful when you use those planets properly. But eighth house sun and a Scorpio moon.
They're the 2 really analytical areas, I'd say, house-wise, aren't they? The sixth and the eighth. It's the places where you can really go deep.
Yes, you can, which is so opposite to that first house, which is just front and center, and what is it experiencing? And those 2 houses are deep. And there's so much around our health that has to do with our psychological state, and where what we process on deeper levels has such an influence on our health.
It's all connected.
It is. And then you got the 12th house. If we're going to look at, in traditional medical astrology, the hardest or the weakest houses medically, the problem houses, are considered to be the 6th, the 8th, and the 12th. right? The 12th is the house, opposite the 6th, it's the house of chronic ailments, it's hospitals, it's institutions where we're hidden away, but it's also that psychic realm of no boundaries and where we lose our energy. And the 12th house comes in for a little bit of a play too.
Yeah, it's an interesting one as well. I was speaking to Wade Caves about the so do I. The astronomical kind of connections or basis of the houses, and how the 12th house is the area of distortion. And we don't see clearly in the 12th, and it's an area where everything is a bit, it's kind of like looking either looking through glasses that aren't prescribed for you, that it just nothing is really quite what it should be.
Description.
But yeah, so and with the 12th house as well, I do find as well, whenever I've got, like whenever the sun's in the 12th for me, or Mars, for example, I always find so depleted, energetically, and the second that it comes through the ascendant, I might get a cold, because I've either been
the ascendant
pushing through, and then suddenly you realize you've been burning all that tiny energy that you had, or I just suddenly get a power up and I just feel like I can fly. So yeah, it's interesting for anybody listening or watching, because this is an enhanced podcast edition, to pay attention to the sun, at least, Mars as well, because that's kind of like your energy and vitality, sort of those indicators in the chart. Having a look at when they move through the 6th and the 8th and the 12th, just to really pay attention to how you're feeling and what's going on, the messages that you're getting. Just to tune into that, because it's easy to just kind of think about, oh well, the moon's in this sign this month, and it's Gemini season or whatever, but actually, what does that mean to you in your chart, and how can you connect with it?
And there's seasons depending on what our sun sign is. There's different times where we're going to feel so much better or not, like during your birth month, and about a week either side of your birthday, it's a real power time. Whereas when the sun is in the opposite sign, that's one of your weakest times of the year, when it's in the square sign. So, somebody that's a Taurus, when the sun is in Scorpio, when the sun is in the other fixed signs of Aquarius and Leo, it's depletion. And they're not going to feel as good, especially when it's exactly right at that, exact opposition or the exact square. Whereas you put the sun, you got an Aries sun, they're going to feel fabulous while the sun's in Leo, or fabulous while the sun's in Sag, because it's in that trine. And I think we don't think about that enough. We all want our energy to be amazing all the time, and it's not. We're so cyclical. So whether you're looking at those hard days, I actually now put in my diary just to remind myself when the sun is trining my sun, when it's squaring, and when it's opposite, just so I can trigger in and go, hey, it's okay for me to feel really crap right now. It's like even the last 3 days, I'm at the end of a head cold. Good old, we talked about this before we recorded. We just had an eclipse, and the eclipse was literally opposite my moon, which is a big trigger in my chart health-wise. And I got this massive head cold that's just put me out for 10 days with all my knowledge. And it's okay to feel down and flat. We always think we need to soldier through and do all this stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm depleted, and I need to, really pull in and make sure I'm okay.
Actually, this is a good point to wrap up, just for the first part. So I just wanted, for anybody listening right now, could you direct them to what you're doing, anything that you want to promote right now, your social media, for example?
Sure. So my website and my social media, all one and the same name. So it's just Astrology of Health. The website's astrologyofhealth.com. On Instagram, Astrology of Health. On Facebook, it's all the same. And what am I doing at the moment? I have a ton of online classes people can take. Lots of one-offs, lots of little 3 5-part series. I do a lot of lecturing for Astrology University, which is a bigger kind of platform. So I have lots of things that I've done for them, but I also have a big suite of my own stuff sitting on my website. And I'm actually, I just finished doing, and it's available to watch or to do at any time, or to take, I should say, it's a class. I created a 5-part series called Medical Astrology for Health Practitioners, because I often teach medical astrology to astrologers, but then I had this whole swag of practitioners that didn't know much about astrology, but they know a lot about the body and natural medicine. So I did this great 5-part series, which is, you can do anytime. You have to pay for it, but on my website. And that was so popular. I'm now doing a 2nd level for them. So that starts in about a week. So that's been really fun, because I had to almost teach regular astrology, as I call it, as well as medical, because people didn't know what houses were or anything.
You've had to switch your brain, literally switch it, so that you're like, teaching the astrological aspect to newbies as opposed to the health aspect to newbies.
Yes. And I have to say, Frank very kindly gifted me to give to all those students. He's got this great booklet that he gives to his new students now that's about 20 pages that explains all the basics. So he even rejigged it for me for all my students.
He is so helpful, isn't he?
Oh my God, he's amazing. Yes.
So we're going to get together in a moment and have a little chat, and, you know, go into sort of just how some of the listeners can actually spot either how to use medical astrology for themselves, or just a bit more of an in-depth chat about that aspect for the listeners. Sure. Lovely. Awesome. Okay, I'll catch you in a moment.
Okay.